November 2024. Mackenzie Michalski, a 31-year-old nurse from the United States, arrived in Budapest for what was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime. She had spent years caring for others, and now it was finally her turn to explore the world, but she never made it home. On her final night, Kenzie was last seen at the famous Simple Kert ruin bar. She was smiling, laughing, and enjoying the city's vibrant nightlife before leaving with a man she had just met. After that, she vanished without a trace. Within days, what began as a missing persons case escalated into an international homicide investigation. Hundreds of hours of surveillance footage, forensic evidence, and digital records would eventually expose a chilling sequence of events, turning the disappearance of an American tourist into one of Hungary's most shocking murder cases of 2024. Welcome to World True Crime Vault. On this channel, we uncover real criminal cases through verified evidence, official investigations, court records, and reliable sources, separating facts from speculation to tell the full story behind each case. In today's episode, we'll retrace the final hours of Mackenzie Michalski, from the moments leading up to her disappearance to the relentless investigation that uncovered the truth and the evidence that ultimately brought her killer to justice. Mackenzie Michalski was born in 1993 in the small town of Fredonia, New York. At 31 years old, she had built a career as a neurosurgery nurse practitioner in Portland, Oregon, caring for patients recovering from complex brain and spinal surgeries. It was demanding work, long hours, difficult cases, and enormous responsibility. But those who knew Kenzie said she never lost her compassion. Friends and colleagues described her as the kind of person who could light up a room with her smile. She was adventurous, endlessly curious, and always looking forward to her next journey. Whether she was hiking, exploring a new city, or simply sharing a meal with friends, Kenzie embraced life with genuine enthusiasm. Travel wasn't just a hobby for her. It was a way of experiencing the world and connecting with people from different cultures. Among all the places she had visited, Budapest held a special place in her heart. She had been there before and had fallen in love with the city's stunning architecture, rich history, and vibrant nightlife. She often spoke about returning someday. That opportunity came in early November 2024, when Kenzie traveled across Europe with a group of close friends. Their itinerary would eventually take them to Italy before everyone returned home. But as the trip drew to a close, Kenzie made one last spontaneous decision. She decided to stay behind in Budapest for just one more night before catching her flight back to the United States. To her, it was simply one final chance to enjoy a city she loved. To everyone who loved her, it would become the last decision she would ever make. On the evening of November 4, 2024, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Kenzie was simply enjoying the final hours of what had been an unforgettable European vacation. At approximately 7:45 p.m., she sat down for dinner at Baracus Silva, a popular restaurant in central Budapest. Before the meal was over, she sent a photo to her friends, a glass of wine on the table, accompanied by a cheerful message. She looked relaxed, happy, and completely at ease. There was nothing in that photo to suggest that anything was wrong. Around 10 p.m., Kenzie left the restaurant alone and made her way toward Budapest's famous nightlife district. As darkness settled over the city, the streets became increasingly crowded. Music poured from open doorways, tourists filled the narrow cobblestone streets, and bars buzzed with conversation in dozens of different languages. For thousands of visitors, it was just another unforgettable night in one of Europe's most vibrant capitals. Kenzie eventually arrived at Simple Kert, perhaps the most famous ruin bar in Budapest. Housed inside a former apartment building, the bar is known for its maze of rooms, eclectic artwork, vintage furniture, and lively atmosphere. Every night, it attracts hundreds of locals and travelers from around the world. Somewhere inside that crowded bar, Kenzie met a man she had never seen before. According to investigators, the two spent the next several hours together. Surveillance cameras later captured them talking, sharing drinks, laughing, and moving through the venue side by side. To anyone watching, they appeared to be two strangers enjoying a night out. At approximately 12:30 a.m. on November 5, Kenzie made a video call to her close friend Gretchen. Nothing about the call seemed unusual. Kenzie appeared relaxed. She was smiling, chatting, and seemed to be having a wonderful evening. There were no visible signs that she was frightened or in distress. Roughly 15 minutes later, she sent one final photo along with another cheerful message to her friends. It would be the last message she would ever send. Shortly afterward, surveillance cameras recorded Kenzie leaving the nightlife district with the same man she had met earlier that night. The two walked away together and disappeared from the camera's view. No one knew it then, but those would become the last confirmed images of Mackenzie Michalski alive. Within hours, what had begun as an ordinary night out in one of Europe's most popular tourist destinations would become the starting point of an international homicide investigation. As investigators reconstructed Kenzie's final hours, surveillance footage, digital evidence, forensic findings, and the suspect's own statements gradually revealed what had happened after the two disappeared from the city's nightlife district. Shortly after leaving Simplakert, Kenzie and the man walked together through the streets of Budapest before arriving at the apartment he had been renting in District 7, Erzsébetváros. It would be the last place Kenzie was ever seen alive. According to the suspect's initial statement, the two shared more drinks and later engaged in consensual sexual activity inside the apartment. But investigators say the evening took a violent turn. Exactly what sparked the confrontation has never been publicly established. What is known comes from the physical evidence, forensic examination, and the suspect's own confession. Sometime during the early hours of November 5, Kenzie was strangled to death inside the apartment. Instead of calling emergency services or reporting what had happened, investigators allege that the suspect immediately began trying to cover up the crime. According to the prosecution, he spent hours cleaning the apartment in an apparent attempt to remove forensic evidence. Later that day, surveillance cameras captured him purchasing a large suitcase from a local store. Authorities believe the suitcase was bought specifically to transport Kenzie's body. Investigators say he then placed her body inside the suitcase, loaded it into a rented vehicle, and drove away from Budapest. The journey lasted for more than an hour, ending near Lake Balaton, the largest freshwater lake in Central Europe. There, in a wooded area outside the town of Siglighet, prosecutors say the suspect abandoned the suitcase containing Kenzie's body before returning to Budapest as though nothing had happened. To anyone passing through that quiet stretch of forest, nothing appeared unusual. But hidden among the trees was the body of a young woman whose family had no idea she was already gone. While the suspect believed he had erased every trace of what happened that night, he had left behind far more evidence than he realized. By the morning of November 5, Kenzie still hadn't returned to her accommodation, and she never boarded her scheduled flight back to the United States. At first, her friends assumed she had simply stayed out late. But as the hours passed, their concern quickly turned into panic. Repeated phone calls went unanswered. Text messages were never opened. No one had heard from her since the early hours of the morning. Realizing something was seriously wrong, her friends contacted the U.S. Embassy, and the Budapest Metropolitan Police immediately launched a missing person investigation. What investigators didn't know at the time was that Kenzie was already dead. Detectives began where almost every modern investigation begins, with technology. Budapest's city center is covered by an extensive network of surveillance cameras, especially around the famous ruin bars that attract thousands of visitors every night. Investigators spent countless hours reviewing footage from streets, intersections, businesses, and nearby buildings, carefully reconstructing Kenzie's final movements. Frame by frame, camera after camera, they followed her path through the city. Eventually, every piece of footage pointed to the same man, the last person ever seen with Kenzie. Once investigators identified him, they quickly learned where he had been staying. On November 7, 2024, police officers arrived at the apartment he had rented in Budapest and placed him under arrest. During his first interview, the suspect insisted that Kenzie's death had been a tragic accident during consensual sexual activity. But detectives already had evidence that contradicted his account. Surveillance footage showed his movements before and after Kenzie's disappearance. Forensic evidence recovered from the apartment told its own story. As investigators confronted him with one piece of evidence after another, his explanation became increasingly difficult to defend. Eventually, according to Hungarian authorities, the suspect confessed to killing Kenzie and agreed to lead investigators to the location where he had abandoned her body. Guided by the suspect, investigators traveled to a wooded area near the town of Siglighet, close to Lake Balaton. There, hidden among the trees, they discovered the large suitcase. Inside was the body of Mackenzie Michalski. Also recovered were several of her personal belongings, including her identification documents, her boots, and the handbag she had carried on the night she disappeared. For her family, the search had come to a devastating end. But for investigators, the case was only beginning. As forensic specialists examined the evidence, an increasingly clear picture of the crime emerged. Surveillance footage documented Kenzie's final movements throughout the evening and showed her leaving Budapest's nightlife district with the suspect. Investigators also recovered digital evidence from the suspect's electronic devices. According to prosecutors, internet searches performed after Kenzie's death included phrases such as "how to dispose of a dead body," "do pigs eat human bodies," and "how long does it take for a body to decompose?" Those searches became some of the prosecution's strongest evidence that the suspect had attempted to conceal the crime rather than report it. Combined with forensic findings, surveillance footage, witness statements, and the suspect's own confession, investigators assembled a compelling chain of evidence. Each piece, on its own, told only part of the story. Together, they revealed exactly what had happened during Kenzie's final night in Budapest. After nearly 2 years of investigation, forensic analysis, and legal proceedings, the case finally went to trial before the Budapest court in July 2026. By then, investigators had assembled an extensive body of evidence, including surveillance footage, forensic findings, digital records, witness testimony, and the suspect's own confession. Throughout the trial, prosecutors argued that the evidence demonstrated a deliberate attempt not only to kill Mackenzie, but also to conceal the crime afterward. The defense, however, maintained that Kenzie's death had been a tragic accident during consensual sexual activity, and argued that the suspect had panicked after realizing she was dead. But the court was not persuaded. After reviewing the evidence in its entirety, the judges concluded that the defendant's actions after Kenzie's death, including cleaning the apartment, purchasing a suitcase, transporting her body, and abandoning it in a remote wooded area, were inconsistent with the behavior of someone involved in a tragic accident. Instead, the court found that the evidence supported a conviction for intentional murder. On July 9, 2026, the verdict was delivered. The defendant, identified by the initials LTM, was sentenced to 14 years in prison. The court also ordered that, upon completing his sentence, he be deported from Hungary and prohibited from returning for 10 years. For the legal system, the verdict marked the conclusion of a complex international homicide case. For Kenzie's family, it marked the end of a long search for answers. Her parents traveled from the United States to Budapest to attend the proceedings in person. In her victim impact statement, Kenzie's mother urged the court to impose the maximum sentence allowed under Hungarian law, saying that no punishment could ever reflect the pain of losing her daughter. Her father spoke about a young woman who had dedicated her life to caring for others, a daughter, a friend, a nurse, someone who had simply wanted to spend one last evening in a city she loved before returning home. That journey never ended. Although the trial brought accountability, it could never restore what had been taken away. For those who loved Mackenzie Michalski, justice brought answers, but it could never bring her home. Mackenzie Michalski was only 31 years old. She traveled to Budapest, looking forward to one more unforgettable night in a city she had grown to love. Instead, that night became the final chapter of her life. Her story is a heartbreaking reminder that even in the most beautiful places, and even during moments meant to bring joy, danger can appear when we least expect it. Following the conclusion of the case, Kenzie's family held candlelight vigils in both Budapest and her hometown of Fredonia, New York. They also expressed their heartfelt gratitude to the Hungarian police, whose swift and professional investigation brought answers when hope was beginning to fade. Perhaps the greatest lesson this case leaves behind is one we should all remember. If you're traveling alone, let someone you trust know where you are. Share your live location whenever possible. Listen to your instincts. And no matter how kind or trustworthy someone may seem, think carefully before going somewhere private with a person you've only just met. Sometimes, a single decision can change everything. Thank you for watching today's episode on World True Crime Vault. If you found this documentary informative and meaningful, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and turning on notifications so you won't miss future true crime stories based on verified evidence and official investigations. Until next time,
Stay safe.
and may Mackenzie Michalski rest in peace.